This is our second session in the new year, and we had a considerable, pretty good audience for the first one, but I think that there has been a lot of confusion with the program since then. But I promised you one thing last time, and I am now trying to live up to the promise, and that is a comparison and the juxtaposition of the two trees of life of the two Kabbalistic systems that we mentioned. As you may recall, I said that the West and the modern times certainly received the Kabbalah as it went to the Jews, and it was primarily worked over by Isaac Luria, or if you want his complete name, Isaac Luria Ashkenazi, which indicates that to the two great groups of Judaism in the West, he was one of the northern and western Jews rather than the Hispanic Jews of Portugal, Spain, and North Africa. But in any event, so there has been an established Kabbalistic system in the Mediterranean area for a considerable time, and that is from that grew out what I call the Lurianic Kabbalah, although other names could also be devised. So the Kabbalah then is really a spiritually infused diagram that contains 10, they are called in Hebrew vessels, or 10 mystical containers which would contain and spread certain spiritual insights and influences. And so that is the one that you see in the lower part of the diagram, and with the inscription Lurianic Kabbalah. But there is something else that only people like H.P. Blavatsky caught on to very early, although everybody else, including her followers, neglected it after, and that is that in the course of the archaeological discoveries on the site of ancient Babylon, there was found a design also of a very similar nature, which then came to be called the Babylonian Kabbalah. It was fully 1,000 years older than the Lurianic Kabbalah. So let's say we are dealing with the design here, and obviously some substance to the design that lasted a long time and is still in existence. Now, for our purposes, this acts as a good illustration of my theory. I don't have anybody else's theory but my own in this regard, about the fact that undoubtedly the Hebrew Kabbalah, the Lurianic Kabbalah, grew out of contact of the Hebrew and the Jewish people with Babylon. And that's obviously quite evident, and all you have to do is look in the Old Testament and you find that the poor Jews were just always fell into the hands of some slave drivers who then took them off to their own country to work for them. And which of course gave opponents of slavery a biblical precedent or two when talking about it. So it would seem that the Jews, having been abducted, in fact, several times, to ancient Babylon as unsalaried workers, to put it in a mild manner, and it would seem that by way of contrasting the chronologies, that they probably picked up the Kabbalistic system, the Kabbalistic pattern in Babylon, and then when at least some of them were liberated from that condition and came back to Palestine, then they had a model. Now, that would be one very mundane and very unmystical explanation of the situation. But I would go a little bit further, and I would say that apparently we are dealing here with a very ancient and very powerful archetype, or an archetypal pattern, as probably Jung would put it. And that this archetypal design in turn was then transported and implanted in Judaism and became the model of the mainly spiritual structure of the universe and of being. And of course, we have had classes here in Kabbalah, and there are tremendous literature about it, which is all built around the manner in which the Kabbalistic pattern had been explained, dealt with, interpreted by the various Jewish scholars, one of whom was Isaac Luria, but there were also quite a few others. But now, what we then need in order to be able to get the full or almost full benefit of these two designs, we have to speculate, but sometimes speculation yields good results, sometimes it doesn't. But we need to speculate about what the intention behind the older one, behind the Babylonian Kabbalah was, what it tried to depict. And my speculative answer would be that in some manner, probably by way of contact with yet different and yet higher spiritual forces, the Babylonians found a pattern, a mandala, a design, which to them described the nature of universal being. And that being prisoners in Babylon for considerable periods of time, I think there was a first and a second and maybe a third or fourth of Babylonian captivity, then this was transplanted onto the Judaic spiritual milieu. Now, that's one way of looking at it. The other one is that the Babylonian Kabbalah and the Hebrew Kabbalah are two different chapters of the same story, and that there is therefore an intimate connection between the two. And that being that the the Hebrew Kabbalah addresses itself to the cosmos, the environment within which humans live. And from that, by studying that cosmos, the various meanings of the different vessels, the Sephirot in Hebrew, from these, the Jewish sages deduced that a certain pattern has been imprinted on the world, on the universe, and that if that pattern is wisely and knowingly understood and studied and meditated upon, and maybe certain practices devised which relate to it, then a closer affinity, a closer connection of the people who engage in such investigation, in such study, arises. So that by studying and having the various sages like Isaac Luria and many others for study, the unseen, and for a long time I think totally secret and unknown constituent parts of universal being were made known. So that anyway, those who wisely and with adequate inner and outer preparation address themselves to, these are both of them called the trees of life, which is a botanical metaphor for a diagrammatic structure of primarily invisible elements in the universe. So when we look at the one that we call Lurianic Kabbalah, consists of 7 vessels, and these 7 vessels each have considerable opening, let us say, to other with the exception of Malkuth, the lowest one, non-physical vessels of universal substance. And this, however, hello there, this, however, joins up with another notion with which it is connected, and that is the notion that the human being can be psychospiritually enriched, can become more conscious, can become wiser, can become more Gnostic when studying and in various ways perhaps practicing the Lurianic Kabbalah, because each one of these spheres as they look, or circles, as my dear friend who do this for me, because my draftsmanship with various other talents that I had before has declined. So by studying the existence and the relationship to each other of these vessels, and also the possibility of moving in consciousness from one to the other, one gains a very wide and very profound knowledge, gnosis, of the universe, of universal being. And when I'm using universe, don't get me mixed in with the flying saucers and things like that, because those things may exist, but their relationship to Kabbalah also has really never been established. But now, if we accept a proposition which was accepted by all the Kabbalists, that the tree of life, which is one of these tenfold diagrams indicates, when we study the tenfold tree of life, we can and probably should undertake that study, meditations, rituals, whatever may be applied, in a sequential manner, and that's how all Kabbalists pretty much carried that out, wherein each one of the vessels of the Sephirot has its own spiritual keynote. Each one of them is a disclosure of consciousness, of universal consciousness. And the way that they should be studied is to start at the bottom, in Malkuth, the kingdom, because that is the one that is most closely related to and coinciding with what? The physical world. And that as we extend our consciousness, and all sorts of methods have been devised in the course of the Hebrew Kabbalah, as we begin to ascend by studying and meditating upon and employing prayers and so forth on the various vessels of which constitute the tree of life, as we move from the bottom toward the top, we are enriched in consciousness, and when we get pretty much toward the top of the same, the consciousness, I would say, is conjoined with and borders upon a fairly profound mystical consciousness. So we are moving from the consciousness of the physical world, which of course also contains non-physical elements, as the seven of Blavatsky, and so forth. But from there, as we move higher and higher, our own individual personal consciousness is enriched with a new spiritual keynote. So each one of these, and of course we had classes and the vast literature about Kabbalah that can explain that to you. But now, at least as far as Lurianic Kabbalah, Western Kabbalah is concerned, when we come to the top of that design, which is the first in terms of its own emanational sequence, but the 10th in terms of the completion of the emanational sequences, there we are, then we have, so to say, so we thought, and so we will probably continue to think, we have sort of exhausted the spiritual components of a very mysterious and very greatly revered diagrammatic archetype, which is the tree of life. So I would say now, where do we find ourselves? And that is also that Kabbalistic study will, if you are pretty honest about it and so forth, would disclose, once you study this tree of life, would disclose the approximate place in consciousness on that tenfold structure as to where you are likely to be. And I am not going to use examples, because the examples would be all grabbed out of air and might not have as great a validity as we think. But in any event, for our purposes, within the material that we have already found of H.P. Blavatsky, and for that matter, of various other mystics, we ask ourselves, okay, if, and it's a great big if indeed we ever get to the point where we can say that our consciousness now is has primarily access to, or functions to a great extent and degree in the top vessel, Keter, then what? Are we then complete and wonderful, and have we become the paradisical Adam now, who, by the way, wasn't all that smart a guy if you read the book of Genesis. He was rather a spiritual dunce. And so it's not really a status to which one wants to aspire too much. Seemingly, if we study these matters in an esoteric function, in the esoteric aspect, it would seem that the authors of the book of Genesis did feel that Eve was a heck of a lot smarter than Adam. And I would say that you have to have a very cockeyed view of reality to deny that, because certainly the story reveals it. Me, you, Apple. This was our Scandinavian version of the story of Genesis, in which we were involved with the guidance of our unfortunately deceased wonderful friend Jan Sater. In any event, now we've wandered a long ways from the tree of life, but in any event, let us say there is definitely, over the centuries, since it became, I would say it became, and I'm very bad with figures. I always was, and one of the reasons is my sainted mother, who started teaching me the, what the heck do you call it in English, the multiplication tables and things like that, when I was very young, probably around 4 years old, and I didn't know what the heck I was learning. But if mother says so, I do. So eventually, one of course finds out more about it, but let us say you have to also keep in mind, and most of you probably also have it in mind, that numerological considerations, these considerations of numbers, are very important in the Kabbalah, because these in turn often give us a little opening into the sphere if we are dealing with the 10th Sephirah, then we can reach certain deductions as to what that vessel, because vessels contain things. If you have various shaped pots and pans and things like that in your kitchen, and those are vessels, and they are vessels to contain something, maybe even more than one thing, depending on the situation. Hopefully some good Hungarian goulash or something like that. But let us say, so it's a very intricate study, and to try to internalize in other than a purely intellectual or emotional manner, to internalize the message that this tree of life has. Because if one is able to, in study, in meditation, move from one of these vessels to another, thereby enriching our own consciousness, well, that is the Kabbalist's way of consciousness expansion. Modern psychoanalysts like Freud and Jung and then, of course, in their wake many others, have practiced that expansion of consciousness by various other means. Dreams. That was the first one, the big one of Freud. Freud was absolutely fascinated and taken over by dreams. And I have not had the pleasure of going to Vienna, even though my best friend and relative, my cousin, lives outside of Vienna. So I have never managed to get to the address in the Berggasse street in Vienna, wherein the Freudians had placed a plaque. Not the Nazis probably took it all off. But in any event, the plaque was a very beautiful plaque saying, "In this house, Dr. Sigmund Freud discovered the meaning of dreams." So that's how important these were to Freud, and for that matter to Jung too. So let's say I would like to be able to go there and look at it. Is it really here? And I have instigated with a great deal of eloquence my one-time employer, Mr. Irving Stone, when he went to Vienna because he was writing his book about Freud, and persuading him to go and read that plaque. And he came back, he said, I forgot. So very smart people can be very forgetful. In any event, so Freud was trying to extract consciousness from dreams, because he realized that dreams have their own way of functioning, that they have a relationship to our awake life, and that they serve a multiplicity of purposes. The one, of course, that fortune tellers and the like have mostly zeroed in is, the dreams tell about your future. I say, if you are lucky, maybe they will. But I can't assure you, because dreams are so rich. Each dream is such a cornucopia of content that you can't be sure whether they were about the past, the present, and the future, or about eternity, which occasionally also comes up. So in any event, Freud was looking for vessels of consciousness, even as they emerge from the unconscious, which is the case with dreams. Now, Jung, Jung, as you know, that was not enough, and so Jung expanded the sphere of the revelatory, the description of the revelatory capacity of dreams. He extended to a much, much larger sphere than did Sigmund Freud. And therefore, some of us have taken a shine to Jung's psychology more than we did to Freud's, although having had to study the life and the associates and the friends and the relatives, all those of Freud for my livelihood for 2.5 years, I became a pretty good friend of old Freud, you know. In any event, let's say, in both cases, if you look at these two, if you look at it Kabbalistically, you might say, all right, let us suppose, even though maybe it's a little wild supposition, let us suppose that one of you or several of you here can say with some degree of veracity that you have traveled the 10 vessels of the Lurianic Kabbalah. Well, I can probably vouch to it that I traveled some, but not all the 10. But let us say, you know, and then there we are. And we can play with these and work around with them and move them here and move them there and increase our consciousness by their interaction, for which reason I found the Kabbalah unbelievably fascinating. I just knew the name and I came across it in some occult books. But then I met a then very young man who was, I think, probably at that time about 15 or 16 years old, my late friend Michael Levitt, who became my first priest in the church, and a very good friend, but who unfortunately, in spite of his young years, had to give up the body. He served for a long time in Vietnam and had picked up, I think, a little more bugs than was good for him. But in any event, he was this young man, like a typical Kabbalist, and having already at age 15 a little paunch, growing a beard, especially when he no longer had to go to Vietnam and things like that. And he knew more about Kabbalah than any book or any teacher that I encountered. The guy was unbelievable. And so I learned what I learned about Kabbalah from him. May God rest his soul. In any event, but it opened up not only a world, but obviously at least 10 worlds, you know, and their connections. So one can definitely do that. But whether one knows all that and works with it assiduously, as my friend did, and so forth, the question still arises once you feel that you have touched at least the supernals, Keter, Bina, and Chokmah, the three top ones, and you can ask yourself, well, now what? Where do we go now? Or don't we go anywhere? Or do we remain here? Now, what the Jewish Kabbalists did for the most part, that they felt that they had enough, that the 10 Sephirot were enough, that the Tree of Life is enough, and that if you travel around the paths of the Tree of Life, you know, in technical Kabbalah you also have sort of lines, channels that connect the various Sephirot. You can go from one to the other. And in the Golden Dawn magical system, these were very greatly studied, meditated upon, and people were moving around in consciousness on the Tree of Life and having rather interesting experiences. I had them myself. But now, let's say, and I'm not going to chronologically fix this, but now, at least in my mind, there is something else. And I think the need, not only my need, but perhaps some of your need, the need of the theosophies of the world, because there is more than one really. The need of the theosophies of the world is, how do we get beyond this? Where do we go? And this has not been answered, to my knowledge, by anybody. Jung, I think, came pretty close to it. I think Jung was a smart old fox, and he, I would say it's implicit in a lot of his teachings that there is more, and that this more can sometimes be reached, and that this more can increase our consciousness immeasurably more than has been available to us in Lurianic Kabbalah somewhere. So I don't think that it is coincidental that very early in Isis Unveiled and in the Secret Doctrine, because it is there too, references are made to the Babylonian Kabbalah or the Babylonian Tree of Life. Why? Because it is, I don't think it takes a lot of imagination or a lot of magic to realize that these two Kabbalahs go together, and that the Babylonian Kabbalah might very well represent a continuation of the process of the enhancement of consciousness which the Lurianic Kabbalah had conveyed to us. You know, I think before the Lurianic Kabbalah there were the travelers in the chariot, which was a poetic way of putting it, that when you really entered the Tree of Life, that you can get on the Merkava, the chariot, and then you can travel from one of the Sephirot to the other. They visualized it in that fashion. Later on, other visualizations took place. Now, so here is the question. The world did not need H.P. Blavatsky, or at least as much as some of us thought when she came, because the world already had the Kabbalah. And you know the writer, the authority whom H.P. Blavatsky quoted more often than any other was none other than Eliphas Levi the Kabbalist. And so why would that be? Because she knew that there was a wonderful system put together for the enhancement of consciousness. And if people work at it hard enough, they really can experience substantial and very informative expansions of consciousness. But she also knew that that wasn't all. That the Kabbalah, as we have inherited it from people like Luria and many others, is not enough. And it is not enough because there is another Kabbalah, there is another Tree of Life above it, beyond it. And if that one is dealt with, shall we say, then certainly the expansions of consciousness of the individual who is involved in this process is going to be quite greater and ultimately more rewarding than the one that we already had. At the same time, I could see why so many people, including Manly Hall. And Manly Hall knew the Kabbalah from one end to the other. I often say, once said to him, Mr. Hall, do you put on Kabbalistic What is it that you play with on ice, like for ice hockey? What is the blade that you put on your foot?
Ice skates.
Ice skates, that's it. Do you have Kabbalistic ice skates and you're moving around on the tree of life because they just come out of him like that? Well, I just came to recognize that the Kabbalah is a very important instrument. Well, I said, thank you, sir. What a man, what a man. How happy I am, how I will never, I never stop giving thanks to Providence, God, whoever it might be, for having brought me in contact with that man. But at the same time, even there, we cannot stop with anybody. We cannot stop with Blavatsky, we cannot stop with Besant, we cannot stop with Max Heindel, or for that matter with Manly P. Hall. Because what all of these people have done, they were there sort of turning on the mystical car, you know. One gave it a turn, brrr, there it goes, and then down the road somebody stops, now what do we do? So anyway, you know, these are the people who got us started. And that is a tremendous thing to do, and for that we should be very, very grateful. But now, the way I brought that into this diagram and so forth, that it is my conviction. From a feeling, it has grown into a conviction. It is my conviction that there is more Kabbalah, that the Babylonian Kabbalah is a continuation, a deepening, an expansion of the existing Hebrew Kabbalah. That's quite understandable, and that's not a put down on the Kabbalah, because it's like you say that, well, when you go past the hallway, then you'll be in the living room. Well, yes, but you know what? If you're not going past the hallway, you're not going to be in the living room. So one leads to the other. It's not an isolated thing. Oh yeah, well, I know, I read Isaac Luria, so I know everything. No, you know what Luria put down. And you also got to remember that the very meaning, the Hebrew meaning of the word Kabbalah, is that that which is handed on. So you can read 1,000 books. I haven't quite read that many, but you can read 1,000 books. You can do all the degrees of the Golden Dawn and so, but there will still be something left, and that something is beyond the Kabbalah. Now, this idea came to me, but then I said in my great, well-known humility, you know, I said, well, who am I? Who is Stephan Hoeller to postulate another Kabbalah? And right about that time, so this is how synchronicities work. Right about that time, I was in the back of the lodge up here, where my good friend, who has now become a Norwegian, you know, people become from male, female, they become from female, male, and they become from American, Norwegian. I mean, we live in a world of constant transformation. No, the only thing I would really deplore, if we have been in Norway, but the only thing that I would really deplore is that their grocery stores and their restaurants are of a very poor quality. Don't go in for Viking cuisine. even in Iceland, which I liked really more than Norway, except that Norway has one thing that Iceland doesn't have and that I adore. It has a king. It has a king. It has a king. King Haakon, I don't know what is it, 31st or something of that sort. In any event, now I got off from the legitimist tracks here, but the issue is that this gentleman had given me a book to read, I think, or maybe I think he gave that book to me, and that book was a Kabbalistic book. It was the book by it is the biography. It is the story. It is first of all, it is by Gershon G. Scholem, who I think is the greatest Kabbalistic scholar of modern times. I had the good fortune of meeting him once, and we had a very enjoyable conversation in the gardens of that monastery where the meeting was held in sonorous German, because he was a German. He moved to Israel, but he was a German, and he spoke excellent Goethean German. So in any event, it was a very nice man, very, very kind, accepting man, and who was also very fond of Jung. In any event, I would say that if one, it's very difficult to explain. I think that moving along the Kabbalah or whatever path that ultimately becomes genuinely mystical is concerned, one has to develop a real feeling for the thing. Once you begin to think Malkuth, think Netzach, think of the and identify some of your experiences in Kabbalistic terms, then you are on the right way. Because you can have tremendous experiences and tremendous expansion of consciousness just with the present Kabbalah. But now why did I bring up our friend Lazarus in Norway? Because he gave me a book by Gershon Scholem, which is the story of the most controversial man in Judaism and in Kabbalah, who is
Shabbatai Zevi.
That's it, Shabbatai Zevi, and in the very last chapter, in the very last couple of paragraphs in that book, Gershon Scholem reveals the secret. You can find the secret there, that once you get to Kether, that's not the end, that there is still something else, that there is, there is a continuation of Kabbalah, and that Shabbatai Zvi knew that. Shabbatai Zvi, the heretic, and this was his heresy, and that is why the rabbis would never forgive him, and why eventually he had to have his head cut off by the executioners of the Turkish Sultan, because they worked against him and they denounced him so much. They said that, he's fomenting a world revolution by the Jews. Isn't that an interesting expression? Isn't that an expression that you hear even now? And you hear it by people who profess to do this for the Palestinian Arabs. I mean, what kind of a confusion is that? But in any event, he mentioned that this was the real reason why his fellow believers were against him. They kept announcing him, and finally they got to the court of the Sultan, because most of the Middle East in those days was occupied by Turkey. I mean, almost Palestine, which has all those troubles now, Palestine was a Turkish province. I can testify to it because my grandfather went there when it was still under Turkey, and several good books have been written about it. So let us say the thesis that Shabbatai Zvi was a Jewish heretic, because that is actually the title of the book. Shabbatai Zvi, something heretic. I can't think of it all now. In any event, that gave me the final approval of this idea that indeed there is more, that the mysticism of Luria and various other people lead somewhere. Like Madame Blavatsky said about her deeper teaching, they are the path. And the path leads somewhere. A path is to be walked on, and not to sit meditating all day and all night. Well, you want to meditate, but don't make that all. I don't want to get started on that. But in any event, let's say it became evident to me that if authorities such as Gershon Scholem can put it right there, that anybody who has the slightest knowledge of history and of the history of the early Kabbalah can see what he's saying. He said, yeah, you get to Kether, and then there is the Ein and the Ein Sofor, and those are the next ones that you meet when you go. So where are you going? You are going into the other tree of life. You have expanded your Kabbalistic knowledge, and undoubtedly as the result of that you may experience tremendous expansions of consciousness. So now this is my theory. I can be the crazy Hungarian, I don't care if that's what they call me, but I think already just having researched this for a few years, and even then not constantly because I had other things to do, I am utterly convinced that there is another tree of life, and that this other tree of life, by its very nature and by the context of the situation, would bring expansions of consciousness to those who enter its practice. And so now when I want to turn this format for the benefit of my fellow theosophists, if I want to turn it into a little bit theosophical language, I would say what has become available to us thus far, first in the Secret Doctrine and in some other books of HPB, and finally by the last Blavatsky books, which only have been republished recently, those indicate to us that there is another theosophy as well, because that's what Kabbalah is. Kabbalah is a theosophy. There is not only one, there are others. And that being the case, it is up to us that we should continue, that we should expand, that we should move into more subtle, perhaps even at times more perilous areas of consciousness, and that by so doing we would accomplish what Blavatsky wanted us to accomplish, and we would move on and on to the path of glory. Because in order to understand what I am saying, or even what I am trying to say, I have to expand my presentation also. What, in Gnostic terms, which are my original ones, what do we do when we enter the Babylonian Kabbalah? When we go past Keter, what do we really do? It's a big, big question. What we do is we recuperate. Is that the right word? We redo the path on which we have come into this world. We are going back to our origins. We are going back to the father of our fatherhood, as the Gnostics called it. We are going back to the source from whence all of these things came. Because what was the path of exit from the eternal becomes now the path of a return. But in order to do that, we have to be flexible and not pride ourselves. Oh, well, I have all the volumes of the secret doctrine. Well, you know what I can tell you? I have not only all the volumes, but I have all the editions, okay? Come and admire me. You know. But the thing is that really this was the beginning. Why does Blavatsky, and for that matter Manly Hoeller, quote Eliphas Levi and Albert Pike, the great Mason, the father of Scottish Rite Masonry, who, when some of the Masonic scholars didn't have anything else to do, so they took his books of the Scottish Rite, and they counted the quotations that General Albert Pike had. You know, he was a Confederate general who was rehabilitated by Abraham Lincoln, and absolutely one of the secret but most astonishing figures of American history. Get hold, if you don't have it, of Manly Hall's book, The Phoenix, which has individual chapters of the great people whom Manly Hall admired. And right there is one with her cigarette of Madame Blavatsky, and a little bit further down with a little remnant of a cigar, General Albert Pike. Needless to say that as a good Mason I have to follow in Pike. But let us say, you know, these people were onto it of what was going on. And that is, I would say, this may not be the only one, and I never went the Scottish Rite way or the York Rite for that matter. I'm just a good old master Mason, but as such I am convinced that Albert Pike and people like that knew this too, that we can add to the Kabbalistic and other mystical knowledge, which is really the foundation of Freemasonry. We can add to it, and we can get further and further, that the temple is not closed. the Temple of Solomon is not closed. And that this is important, because this is the real idea of progress. It is not evolution or evolution, as the preachers sometimes on television Sunday night call it, but it is an ongoing process of our own transformation until we are retransformed into that which we originally were and still are, and moving on thereby into the eternal. The ancients knew it, the Babylonians knew it. You can't go much further back than Babylon, except something that I haven't mentioned yet, and that you're going to chastise me for. You're going to flagellate me with whips and things like that, because what I didn't mention was that this is of extremely great importance, but it's a part of a greater structure. I have sort of suggested the Gnostic structure of being by saying that it reminds us somewhat of a pyramid, and the pyramid is the beginning point. That is where the God the Father, the eternal creative agency, and his Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, whichever we want to look at it is. It is, but from there, in a pyramidal fashion, flowed out the worlds and the universes. The sun and the moon and the stars, the planets, all came from there. But if we want to retrace our way, if we want to get back to where we came from, if we want to undo the mistakes that have occurred in creation and which are still afflicting us, then we have to find a way back. And this is the way back. This is the image of it. Now, how to do it, I can tell you. So, if that's what you're waiting for, then you can wait till I don't know what. Till you wait till you get there. But let us say the pattern now reveals itself. And if there are any good theosophists, my theosophical brothers and sisters, who are Kabbalists also, and certainly many of them are, and even more of them were in the past, if they look at that and see, we've still got a ways to go. We still got But Blavatsky opened the door. Blavatsky pointed us to the stairway to the eternal. But we are the ones who got to climb it. We are the ones who got to do it, and we still got some climbing to do. Now, if you ask me how, then I'm probably going to plead ignorance, because but all these people, including some who have a very bad reputation, like Edward Alistair Crowley, why do you think that Crowley went into magic? Because he wanted to go further. And so, the black magician. Well, black, blue, whatever the color may be, there is a way to go yet. There are things to be discovered. There are things to be changed in ourselves, and that is the true continuation of Madame Blavatsky's work. Now, I should have spoken about a number of other things, because I think I even gave as one of the titles for this evening something that I haven't spoken about at all. But you have seen and heard me do things like that. No, it was the shaman, because as I will go further, how are things now? A little. Shamanism the rediscovery of shamanism preceded our present era, but was subsequent to the discovery, the transformative discovery of Kabbalah. So shamanism is in there. Why? Because it would be one would have to be privy to the actual historical events that went on, and of course we are not. But it is my feeling that something that happened was that, let's say, the Babylonian Kabbalah way off, it extended way off into Asia, and then there were wars, and then there was just came the great hero of consciousness, Alexander the Great, and he subdued the Babylonians, and he subdued everybody, and until he came back to Egypt, and his tomb was never found. He disappeared. He went to where he really belonged. Because to me, Alexander the Great is an avatar, if you want to use that Hindu term. But it's like saying that Billy Graham was the Pope, you know. No, Billy Graham was a great leader of Protestantism. That's what he was. But anyway, not to get entangled here into things too much, but let us say that is what really happened. The Babylonian discoveries in consciousness were brought by Alexander and his wise men, whom he took with him, from the Babylonian Empire through all the territories there clear back to Egypt. And this was the beginning of the next step of the esoteric tradition. The esoteric is a tradition. It's not one man or the other. I know the Christians concentrated greatly on Jesus, and I would say he was a remarkable enough being that it can take the dedication of many lives to even come close to him. This was a true messenger from the pleroma. But there are others, and there are other things that happen, and there are impulses and systems and recognitions of archetypal patterns and within them of beings which we haven't even touched. And some of these, I think, are indicated in the Babylonian model of the Tree of Life. So I would say, first of all, that certainly the cosmos, let us say, the disclosures of the secret doctrine and of Isis Unveiled, and of other more poetic works of Blavatsky, like The Voice of the Silence. These are the entranceway to the Kabbalah as we know it. And then the Kabbalah itself, very, very important. In other words, you can't bypass any step, any stage. And not to toot my own horn a little bit and so forth, maybe in the Christian tradition, at least in some of the sacraments, in the blessed bread and wine, maybe there is another vessel, another Sephiroth, something that can take you upward. But no, we are too smart for the Holy Eucharist of the Eastern Orthodox and the others. We don't see that there is other very, very powerful and very secret way, and that if we touch it, if we go with it, maybe we'll slide our way into the Babylonian Kabbalah, and all of a sudden here we will be sanctified and glorified, because we're wise enough to look at and to take advantage of the opportunities that have come our way. But if we discard the opportunities, oh well, you know, we have the internet now, you know, internet schminternet. You are never going to find through terrestrial mechanical means what you can find in the spirit. You see? But lots of people won't accept that. So we have to lead them around the ring and the rosy in various ways so that they catch a glimpse. And in my, by now, anything but short life, I have encountered many, many people, more people than I can count, I have encountered, who somewhere along the way came upon it, that there is more. There is not just reincarnation, there is not just karma, there is not just, and I say it, I don't give a damn if they throw me out of the Theosophical Society, the semi-fictional masters. Semi-fictional, you want to read about a semi-fictional master, then, I didn't bring the Jung book, did I? Well, we have to bring it on Sunday, because in Aniela Jaffe's version, it becomes quite clear that Jung's master code was Philemon, and that therefore there are mysterious sources of consciousness. You can call them masters or you call them monsters, but when they become the kind of engraved, encrusted false deities that they have in many places, just look at the writings of what was the name of the woman who took over from the ballads, Elizabeth, whom I have always called Clear Prophet. Elizabeth Clear Prophet and her masters, which are all stolen and elaborated from the Theosophical sources. So it is no doubt true that there are agencies in this strange pyramid where we live that can be of assistance to us. But a master, as one teacher of me said, don't use the word master too much. Masters need slaves. That was the kind of tough language that person engaged in. And it really opened my eyes quite a bit. But what it really means is that there are all kinds of assisting agencies around. There are all kinds of potential helpers, even as there are potential seducers, potential hellish beings, because that's all here. This place is, if you think that this place is all good, then you've been reading a different book, because it isn't. But there we come into the alchemical paradigm, that there is black and white and good and bad and things of that sort, and that there is a certain work to be done. There is certain reconciliation of the opposites needs to take place, as indeed C.G. Jung, translating his many, many studies of alchemy. You know, he wrote more about alchemy than about psychology. Why? because to him alchemy had a very profound psychological purpose and content, for which reason you can come, as even HPV did herself, and now we see it in her alchemical letters and so on, that certain processes they are involved in this Babylonian Kabbalah. When you get past the dividing line, the wall between our Kabbalah that we know here, the Jewish Kabbalah, and the Babylonian Kabbalah, when you cross that line, I assure you, and this one from personal experience, the beings, the images, the creatures, that you encounter, they are enough to drive you crazy. And that's why you need some good psychology to keep you sane, if you are indeed sane. Or maybe make you return to some sanity. It's a wild place over there. But behind that wildness, there is an ever-increasing light. And it is not the light of hellfire, as some of the fundamentalists would like to tell you. It is the eternal light which, unbeknownst to yourself, you are. And as you awaken to who you are, then everything begins to change more and more. And the two Kabbalahs have come together, and the prophecies of the prophets with their mysterious beings in the heavens, with the four beasts and all of that, they are all there. And they are all there to help you. They are not there to capture you, they are not there to deceive you. And that is very important. So as we come to the end of this particular dissertation, let me say that almost nothing has given me more joy and protracted joy than for what I consider the discovery of the two trees of life, our ability to continue in the eternal Kabbalah and the return to our Father's home. So if I am getting a little bit whatever with this, forgive me, because there is no greater joy than the intimation of that incredible reality, which is our reality, which is right here, but which is at the top of the pyramid, and our means and our ability to return to that reality, and for the first time in millions and millions of years, to be really free. Thank you very much.